Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with your reference recording for Bach's B minor Mass. Oh, this is a toughie. Well, it's not in some ways it is, and in some ways it isn't. And let me tell you exactly how it is which in each case. First of all, there isn't one reference, there are two. One of them on period instruments, one of them on modern instruments. Now, often we don't get a period instrument reference recording because, all hell broke loose when the period instrument movement got whooping. And as a result of that, there were so many recordings coming out at the same time that there weren't really any clear consensus picks. But the B minor Mass is an exception. There are exceptions to every rule. And then there is a pre-period instrument recommendation, which is, I think, less controversial, or will be less controversial. But, the bottom line with the B minor Mass is that there are so many recordings of it now. I mean, I don't know, are there hundreds? Who knows? And so many of them are excellent. I mean, really first class, that it's very, very difficult to land a reference recording with any confidence today. I mean, you couldn't do it today. There's no way you could get a consensus together today as to what the great recordings are. But there was at one point a consensus, and the first one is this one. And I want to point out that none of these B minor Masses are my personal favorites. They're all just things that I've observed, things that people have told me, things that I've read about, things that there was a consensus. And it's this one. It's Karl Richter with the Munich Bach Choir and the Munich Bach Orchestra, with a wonderful array of soloists, Maria Stader and Herta Topper and Ernst Hayfliger and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau and Keith Engern. It's just marvelous. It really is. I mean, I tend to prefer on normal instruments. My favorite is the Joachim Bavarian radio recording. Actually, it was done in Munich too. That's a digital thing. That came out much, much later than this. This is 1962. But it was marvelously recorded. It was, for its day, the acme of period style, just about. I mean, it really was, although it sounds huge in comparison to so many of the performances that we hear nowadays with their teeny tiny pint-sized forces. I happen to think that huge is right in this piece because it's a huge piece. I mean, who are we kidding? And to try and do it back in the day the way Bach might have done it, I think is just stupid because, first of all, Bach never heard it. He assembled it later in his life. We know that his ideal was always to have bigger and more than what he actually got. And of all of Bach's works, I mean, this has got to be the one that is, that benefits most from taking a more idealistic view of how to perform the thing. I really believe that. I mean, there are moments here that are thrilling beyond belief, especially at the end of the credo, the Et Resurrexit, and the closing chorus. I mean, it's just thrilling. It's unbelievably thrilling. The screaming trumpets and Richter just goes for it. You might say it's too romantic or something like that. I don't know. Well, who cares what you think? It's great. It's just great. So this was the reference. I mean, it was the reference for people who cared about Bach and who wanted to know what, Bach-like things sounded like in the 60s and most of the 70s. It really was, and it's kind of funny because, part of it was the fact that, I mean, this was the German thing. I mean, it was, Germans were supposed to know how to do Bach. I mean, there was a certain nationalistic element in this. And I know when I was young and I was looking for Bach, we trusted those German people to tell us what Bach was supposed to sound like. We really did. And I did. And they didn't steer us wrong. I mean, they really didn't. This was just a remarkable B minor Mass. So Richter's first one, he did a remake on the live one that wasn't as interesting. I don't think it wasn't as good. But there's the big Richter box. You can go find it there if you're really excited. But this is a stunning B minor Mass, and it was the reference for God knows how long, like decades. Everyone just said, "Oh, go listen to Richter. Go get Richter." I mean, other people were doing them. There was the Crazy Scherchen. There was Klemperer's, which is also marvelous in its way, with smaller forces. But this is just powerful, and it really conveyed that sort of spiritual, transcendental kind of power that you wanted to hear in the B minor Mass, and that I think people still want to hear, even though it's much harder to come by these days than it used to be. So there you go. This was the reference, without a doubt, in stereo for the B minor Mass. However, when the period instrument stuff started happening, we knew that there would be performances popping up. And of course, Harnoncourt did it a couple times, for example, and Leonhardt did it, and everybody was doing it. But they were sounding rather strange and kind of creaky. Do you remember the Harnoncourt, Leonhardt, Bach cantata cycle that was coming out? And the first B minor Mass that Harnoncourt did sort of was about the same time as those. And they were controversial. I mean, there was no way they were going to become reference recordings for anything. They were almost experimental in what they sounded like. In order to have a reference recording for the B minor Mass, you had to have a version by somebody that had all of the thrills and polish and excitement of Richter, of those guys, of the guys who were doing it day in, day out as their meat and potatoes repertoire. And that meant it took some time. It took some time for the period instrument people to coagulate, to learn how to play their instruments and to, develop the kind of excellence and polish and brilliance that we expected to hear in that music. And this of all works. I mean, the B minor Mass is not a forgiving work. You don't just truck it out and, and do it. And while you can, try and recreate period sounds, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a great performance. And you have to have, for a reference, again, in this of all pieces, a great performance, which is also somehow, the iconic example of what you can do, an exemplar for what the period instrument movement can do when it really got rocking. And the version of that, and there is a version of that for the B minor Mass. There isn't one for like the St. Matthew Passion and some of these other pieces. But for the B minor Mass, there is one, and it's Gardiner's. It's John Eliot Gardiner, which came out. Let me see. It's in this box of things. I have it separately. Let's see for a second here. Okay, John Eliot Gardiner, B minor Mass. Does it have a date? It really should. That would be nice. So it's with the Monteverdi Choir and the English Baroque Soloists and all of those people. Monteverdi Choir, yes, English Baroque Soloists, which are, of course, all the same people and all the other English period instrument thingies. Do they give us a date? Why should they? Hang on. It must be in the back. Here we go. B minor Mass. Let's see. 1954. No, that's the edition. That's the edition, the recording. Okay, here we go. There's the notes. 1985, BWV. Okay, so what's the BWV? They make it so hard. I mean, what is the point? BWV 232. I know you guys all have that memorized. I never pay attention to these things. 1985. So 1985, that was a long time ago when you think about it, but it wasn't so long. It was really, think about it, what was happening in 1985. We'd had a couple of decades of period instrument stuff going on. That means time for these ensembles to really brush up their game, to get going, to be comfortable with their instruments, comfortable with the style of performance and singing and whatever. And you had John Eliot Gardiner, who is, a complete son of a bitch when it comes to, handling his players. He's very strict. He's a taskmaster. He's kind of miserable. And, he wrote a book about Bach, so I guess he knows what he's doing. He ran around, Europe with the biggest money-wasting vanity project in the universe, doing all the Bach cantatas. I mean, he's very serious about his Bach. And he achieved extremely professional results. I mean, are they the most expressive and emotional? I've got about a dozen period instrument style B minor Masses that I might like better than this one on any given day. But what you cannot deny is that it is brilliantly played, brilliantly sung, very nicely recorded. It's a little bit steely and cool because Gardiner was like that. His performances tend to be kind of steely and cool, but also they can be very, very exciting. I do not deny the results that he got. I mean, it's the same thing with Toscanini. He was a bastard too, and he got great results. So, he didn't get points for personality. Let's put it that way. And neither does Gardiner, for being, personable. Let's put it that way. But there's no denying the excellence of the results that he got and the standards that he upheld. I mean, he really did, except in his Bach cantatas. Some of those are scruffy. But this B minor Mass was marvelous. It was, in a sense, the culmination of what you might call the first period of historically informed performance. It was like that. And when it came out, everybody just said, wow, it's fabulous. It's the one. Now, it ceased being the one about 10 minutes later, but when it came out, it was the one. It was the reference, and it still is. It's an excellent version if you want to hear the work on period instruments, and with all of its tricky performance issues successfully solved in period instrument terms. The number of players is the right number of players. It doesn't sound too big. It doesn't sound too small. The choir sings absolutely fabulously in the big double choruses and the Hosanna and the 6-part Sanctus and all this stuff where, they're dividing up into larger antiphonal and other sorts of things. He manages to put over all of that stuff very well. The solo instrumentalists are excellent. By then the English early music mafia had sort of gotten itself together with its pool of players who were going to form whatever ensemble du jour they were called. But they were very, very talented, and they were very comfortable with their instruments. And Gardiner knew exactly what he wanted. He had a clear conception. And so I know it sounds like I'm damning him with faint praise, but I'm not. I don't want to take away the achievement that this represented. It was a considerable achievement, a magnificent achievement, and it still is. I really believe that. And, I make fun of these people a little bit only because they're so humorless. I mean, they're just so humorless and conceited about what they're doing. And, they think they're God's gift. And you say, yeah, come on. Especially now that there are 40 billion recordings of the B minor Mass out there, right? So we can have a little fun at their expense without taking anything away from them in terms of what they achieved artistically. So there are 2 reference recordings for the B minor Mass. The first non-period instrument is the Richter, which was a classic version, from way back when, and it still sounds pretty powerful. Let me tell you, if you grew up with period instruments, listen to Richter. You owe it to yourself. It's not heavy. It's not sluggish. It's just going to blow you through the back wall of your listening room. And otherwise, for period instruments, if you've got your period instrument, teeny tiny 1-person to a part, B minor Mass and all that stuff, listen to Gardiner. Give Gardiner a chance too, because he offers many of the same thrills from a different aesthetic perspective. And so we can enjoy both equally, as I do. We don't have to pick, we just don't have to. Bach is bigger than anybody. It's bigger than any of these people. There's more to him than any one performance realizes. And so, you owe it to yourself, if you love the work, to hear as many different perspectives on it as makes sense to you. And these reference recordings, I think, crystallize 2 of those perspectives particularly clearly and successfully. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.